Thank you for joining our webinar today, Assessing Cloud Readiness in Your Future Interoperability Demands. Before we get started, we're going to introduce a poll to the audience that we will be using in our discussion today. In just a few minutes, we'll be talking about it, but you'll see a poll pop up on your screen in just a moment, and it will be: how likely is your organization to move infrastructure to the cloud in the next 12 months? So if you'd kindly answer the poll. Again, we'll use this in our discussion in just a few minutes, but we'd like to gather this information so we can be more meaningful in our discussion to you. First, before we get started, and as you're answering the poll question, I wanted to provide a few housekeeping logistical reminders. This is a live session and it's being recorded. Anyone who registered for this event will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours. And while the lines are muted for everyone, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them in the chat. We do our best every time we do one of these to answer your questions during the session. And so it will be interactive, and we encourage you to participate in that way, and also with the additional polling questions that will proceed throughout the session today. Your responses will help influence the conversation for not only the next few minutes, but also what we do here at Rhapsody to ensure we are addressing your needs in the cloud moving forward. So thanks again for answering those poll questions. We will give it maybe 30 more seconds. I think we may have already closed it out, and we will go ahead and get started. So thank you for participating in that poll. So my name, without further ado, my name is Dan Rice. I'm Product Marketing Manager here at Rhapsody. And I'm really fortunate to have two panelists on the webinar today that have significant responsibilities in this area in helping shape how we deliver Rhapsody Cloud software and services today and in the future. Zach, Rick, if you don't mind introducing yourselves to the participants here.
Sure, Dan, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Zach Mortensen. I'm Vice President of Portfolio Product Management. My team and I are responsible for defining our offerings and our roadmaps.
Yeah, and I'm Rick Watrous. I'm the Principal Integration Architect on the Rhapsody side, primarily responsible for a lot of the solution design when it comes to our interface deployment and management in the cloud. So,
thank you both, and really excited for our discussion today. So let's jump right in. Today we'll be discussing the state of the cloud computing market in healthcare, and along the way we'll try to get your feedback on how the common cloud motivators relate to you. We'll discuss the path to the cloud, some different trajectories, if you will, to the same end goal. And then we'll move to review some fundamental building blocks that help support optimal connected care. And in our conclusion today, we'll wrap up by summarizing our thoughts on how to pivot and be future focused. So when we look at the state of the cloud market today, we're sourcing some information from Grand View Research, and Grand View, when we look at we had to pick a market, so we're going to look at the US cloud market, but the estimated growth rate from 2023 to 2030 is estimated at 16.7% combined annual growth rate. And if you look at the third bar here in the bar graph, the market size valued at USD $56.3 billion, you'll notice the blue and the black. The black is traditional infrastructure as a service hardware. And what's interesting is almost 80% of the growth, the actual revenue coming through this, is software and services and SaaS. Those have been significant growth areas. And where we might think just it's lift and shift into hardware and infrastructure, no, it's actually enormous amount of this is services and SaaS, and really taking into account another survey from Gartner, this CIO survey, you can see where it came from. Just this year, there was a quote that said from the CIO respondents, it said a striking 45% of respondents indicated that new tools, technologies, and applications they want to deploy are only available in the cloud, accelerating the migration to cloud-based solutions. So even from these respondents, it's out of necessity we see some of this happening. But there are other motivators as well. And before we move on, I'd like to pause and actually post what the poll results were earlier. So let's stop and take a look at the results from the survey from the beginning of the webinar and see how these trends relate to the participants today, those of you on the call.
Yeah, so personally, just as a kind of initial thought, seeing the poll responses, the already in process is where I expected to see a good portion of you. It looks like about a quarter of the respondents were there, and that's good to hear kind of where we're at, given the conversations I have with our clients on a day-to-day basis and the discussions we have around, with so many options out there, who's already taking advantage of some of the cloud strategies. The unsure is a pretty high percentage. I'm surprised, and Zach, I want to hear your thoughts as well. Maybe this will help sway you in one direction or the other, or you'll be open to conversations about whether it's a strategy that involves Rhapsody or just some of the knowledge that we can help impart on you guys as we kind of go forward, helping you on your cloud journey. And same with the unlikelies. I'm surprised to see that's pretty high. Again, given the conversation I've had. So yeah, hopefully this will be a meaningful discussion and for some of those folks that are on the fence or unlikely, and we can kind of understand more about why you're in that space today and how we can help. So Zach, I don't know if you have any thoughts as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rick. I think those unsures might be a case of it depends. And I've talked with a number of customers recently where there is a cloud strategy in place, migrations to cloud are happening, but it's a bit, I would say, opportunistic in the sense that if it makes business sense, they're willing to do it. But there's not like a very well-defined roadmap to make it happen.
Excellent. Well, for the cumulative, I guess it's around 54% that were either somewhat likely, very likely, or already in the process. We'd especially like to get your feedback on this next question, and everyone, of course, please respond. But we're going to post another polling question in just a moment, and it's going to speak to something else.
Yeah, so for this one, kind of in line with some of those motivators that Dan mentioned, this one's if you're in the process of moving to the cloud, what do you see as your organizational motivators? And this is a multiple choice, but you can choose more than one. Kind of would like to see the cumulative responses from the group here, where you guys are all at. For some context for some of these, the compelling event could be it mentions recent acquisition. Maybe you're merging or acquired by a company that is already more cloud focused, and they want to move what you're already doing into the cloud alongside their existing portfolio. Or it's your C-suite went to a conference and everyone heard the word cloud and they came back and said, hey, let's think about this cloud thing a little bit more. And all of a sudden you got to figure out, okay, well, what does that mean to our deployment? Cost savings, as we'll kind of touch on later, could be, if you're paying for a whole bunch of hardware today, you might see an opportunity to scale, which is also the option here. And with that comes cost savings, particularly in a lot of the cloud suites and products today. Resiliency, high available architecture. When you're doing physical hardware, you're basically doubling your cost because you want to be highly available. And then security, whether that means data security, which there's so many tools in the cloud for that today, and so many options available, to physical security, where if you have your own data center, you're paying staff to monitor the security of that to make sure that your data is safe.
So I guess next we'll just close this poll out and go ahead and show the results. And let's see what we have.
Yeah, so you see a lot of the responses are in the cost savings, scalability, and resiliency space, which makes a lot of sense, particularly scalability being the highest percentage there. And that's, in my experience, on a day-to-day basis for how, in my realm of, okay, how am I going to deploy these solutions in the cloud in a way that offers our customers the ability to be forward thinking and say, okay, we're going to start by developing these solutions that you're implementing at, for some of our smaller sites, like a pilot client or a handful of initial integrations. But you're always thinking about, well, what's the next 5, 10, 20, 50 clients of ours look like in the cloud. Does make that a lot simpler when you're planning that in a quick way. Zach, if you have thoughts as well.
No, I think this echoes what we were discussing in the previous poll, the idea that if there's a business case in terms of cost savings or increasing any of the capabilities of the organization, the scalability, the resiliency, et cetera, then organizations would see that as favorable and compelling to move to the cloud.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a lot to digest there and talk through as we have individual conversations. And even when I look at cost savings being so high, I've talked with someone recently. We're putting together a case study, just hearing how they incrementally added integration servers over the years. Their costs had gotten so high of using their own public cat cloud relationships, taking all those servers down to one Rhapsody as a service instance. The cost savings were enormous, but everyone's situation is a little different in the way they've managed it in the past and moving and where the cost savings might be if they're there. So really, really interesting stuff and great conversations to have with you individually as time goes on. And so just kind of reiterating the motivating factors that we already talked about. And sometimes if you're in a wait and see mode, that compelling event is really you've been doing the due diligence and the prep. Maybe that compelling event moves you to that next step of actually making that journey. And that's really where our next slide goes. And after talking to many customers for many years, I think our first cloud customer was in 2017. No one's journey is exactly the same. And this next visual has a thoughtful way of portraying it. Zach, could you take us through what we're looking at here in the diagram?
Happy to, Dan. So as we prepared for this webinar, we looked at how to quantify or sort of break down individual journeys to the cloud in ways that make sense and tried to capture some of the patterns that we see in our customer relationships. I think in the lower left corner of this diagram, you'll see customers that have legacy apps and on-prem infrastructure, and I think we all started there at some point. And in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see cloud native or cloud smart organizations. My guess is that organizations that started, I'm thinking technology companies that started within the last 4 or 5 years, probably started as cloud native organizations with no on-prem infrastructure or applications. And the rest of us are somewhere in between. There are a couple of different paths that we see organizations follow on a journey from the lower left to the upper right. One of them is in the vertical dimension, in which we make investments in scaling up our architectures to make them a little bit more cloud ready and breaking apart layers like storage and middleware and applications, and then maybe moving those layers individually to the cloud. On the horizontal axis, we see more of a lift and shift approach in which individual solutions are lifted from the data center and dropped as a unit in a cloud infrastructure. And there's some sort of hybrid approach to that where some of those pieces might be on-prem and others might be in the cloud. So if you follow that path, you'll probably find yourself in that lower right corner. And then, the rest of us are somewhere in between. There may be a mix of these approaches in terms of scaling up our services capabilities and scaling out our infrastructure with a hybrid mix, and that's that center box. So if you see those numbers in the lower right, 1, 2, 3, and 4, just make a note of where you see your organization today.
I think we have a poll for that. You can post that to get your take on where you're at on this grid. When we talk about where on the grid your organization currently resides, thinking back to the grid, I don't think you can only see the question now. One being that bottom left, the integration engine and app still on premise. 2 was over the horizontal axis to the right, lift and shift. Number 3, cloud smart environment, which was top right ideal state. And for those newer HCIT companies, that may be where you live already. And number 4 is hybrid in between. All right, so if we can go ahead and close out the poll, go ahead and see some results.
Oh, wow, I'm surprised that there's so many in that first category that are still on premise. So that kind of, I guess, aligns with the large percentage that we saw at the initial poll around folks that are unsure or even the not likelies. But the hybrid currently seeing that at 23%, I think makes a bunch of sense given our expectations, like Zach was saying, around where most folks are probably. But that's surprising. So hopefully this is informative for some of those folks in that first category, where we can talk about, if you are interested in the cloud, we're here to facilitate, or we're here to inform. So.
And I'd love to hear like where you think the blockers are on making that move from the bottom left. And I had there's a customer and one in my mind that we've talked to in the last couple of weeks that was talking about this, and they really just didn't like the way many places in the industry almost talk about it like they called it a big bang. They're like, we can't go just, if they were looking at this graph, they'd probably say, I can't shoot my way like a rocket to the top right. That just is not going to happen. We don't like the big bang. We're going to take an iterative, measured approach. And I thought that was thoughtful. And they've been working with us on an 18-month plan. And hopefully in the future we'll talk about them. And we can maybe interview them on a webinar and a Connect conference in the future. Just because I think that's probably where most of you are sitting. You can't make that move overnight. We splashed up screens in the past where we can make a move in an X number of weeks. Really, it's probably more like X number of months, and that's okay. And there's more than one way to do this, and people get really creative when they talk to us on ways to approach this. Any other thoughts from the panel?
Yeah, I'd love to, if we can invite any participants to leave some comments in the chat. Dan, is that a capability that we can do? I'd be interested to hear what the constraints are, because as Rick said, we've got some aspirations to be in the cloud, and it is a little bit surprising to see that most organizations would classify themselves in that first square. So help us understand that. Is it a resources constraint? Is it a technology constraint? Is it a sort of procedural constraint? Is it prioritization? There are all sorts of different things that cause organizations to want to remain where they are, even though they want to be someplace else. And we'd love to understand more about that.
Yeah, and I think some of the discussion we had prior to setting this up, where we kind of expected things to fall, our vendors are split between a lot of the HCIT folks who have a product or an application that they're putting into the market, and customers that are healthcare systems that are, clinics or hospital systems that are looking for some opportunity to engage other clients with data integrations and sending data between your systems in and out. I imagine that given we're talking healthcare here, a lot of those health systems are on legacy software. Still, it's always been the case that, we're still using HL7. It's like 30 years old at this point, as a pretty standard data transmission protocol. But, you've got these ingrained integrated systems, particularly legacy ones that don't need to fit into your portfolio or your deployment strategy. And it's just hard to what Dan was mentioning, where you're talking about timelines that seem so long, particularly for really large health systems that maybe still have their own data center, to talk about, okay, this is going to be an 18-month project to move our on-prem data system or data center into a cloud deployment and still keep all these things up and running in the meantime. I myself, with past experience working at Epic at one point, and with a whole bunch of other different vendors and EHR technologies, even an upgrade from one version to another is such a major task that now we're talking about having to, either lift and shift, in that model where you're kind of just, let's just move what we have to the cloud and just get there in the first place, to the idea of, okay, well, let's get everything, not just the actual deployment in the data, but also the tooling and all of the integrated systems that's going to be virtualized and all this stuff, and get our users on board and train the right people and bring in the right staff. It's so many considerations, and I think that will be more of the discussion we have in the next few slides around all those considerations. But would love to see some responses or some folks' thoughts on what are those considerations and how can we help provide some knowledge there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. I think that's a great segue. And as we get questions or comments into the chat, we can stop and talk about that as we go. So we'll be waiting on that if you want to respond. This next slide is more fundamental building blocks, assessing your building blocks for a successful cloud migration. If you do a quick internet search for cloud readiness, you're going to find some really good resources, some from our own partners like AWS and Azure. But here's just another way to look at it: building blocks for optimal integration and connected care that you're looking for. It's probably what you're experiencing on-prem and you're very happy with it, and maybe you're not moving. But whether cloud-centric or on-prem, it really requires some due diligence across multiple focus areas. Think of these building blocks as necessary to maintaining stability to your environment. You can tell as the structure goes up, this is a structure, there are many dependencies on each other, and what it gives you is that structural integrity. And if you have that structural integrity, you're able to fully enjoy the motivators that we all discussed earlier. And for instance, like looking at the bottom layer, at the base infrastructure layer, when maintaining it myself, do I have the policies, procedures, and IT expertise to appropriately plan for DR and resiliency and security? And if not, who can help in hosting and then maintaining that environment? And then we take it up to the software layer. Do I have the time allocated to monitor the software installed, the integration environment itself, as well as taking care of necessary updates to get the latest features and quarterly releases, and even more importantly, again, take care of security needs? And then finally, for the top layer, if I assess my team that's in place or that I'm building, do I have the coverage for everything to make the integration environment stable, secure, scalable, and ready to take on any of the interoperability projects that come my way? Which again, we think we mentioned it earlier, but that results in that optimal connected care that I'm looking for. Rick, you have been, your team, you and your team deal with this top 2/3 of this pyramid every day. What do you think, and where do you see the most common challenges for organizations?
Absolutely. So yeah, just as a reminder, my day-to-day job is helping our clients to strategize how to deploy a data integration solution within the bounds of what their current platform looks like, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem. But there are more considerations just to where's my data going to live and how am I going to manage it. When we're talking data integration, it's how do I get data in and out of my system in a secure way. If you're on the HCIT side, you're primarily concerned as a first priority with my application or my product, and the development and the deployment and the user engagement and the marketing and all of that is primarily focused on a daily basis on that. And then on top of that, if your product relies on getting data in and out of your system, that's an entirely other conversation. It's almost like you need to have an entirely separate team or a separate group that's primarily responsible just for that portion. And that dichotomy just doesn't make sense to a lot of folks who come in and have an idea of we're going to have the best appointment reminder app. A lot of appointment reminder clients. Okay, well, how are you going to get patient data in order to get patient phone numbers or names, locations, etc. So all of a sudden that strategy becomes, okay, well, now we need to have a team that knows how to get that data. Well, your developer of an app might not have the knowledge to also build a data integration engine. So it's almost like your strategy, even when it's in the cloud or considering the cloud, your first priority is to figure out how to deploy your product there. And then it's figuring out how to deploy the integration capabilities or the components that are going to allow for the facility of, all that data coming in out of your system. So that's primarily where I live on a day-to-day basis. And I see the biggest blockers being that staffing side. It's that integrated knowledge of, you can't just bring a whole bunch of smart developers who know how to deploy an app and tell them now you have to figure out how to deploy a solution around data integration. They may not be familiar with the engine tools or the protocols that are out there, or the clinical context for how to take advantage of some of the capabilities. A lot of HL7, FHIR, CCDA, all of that stuff is a whole nother knowledge set. I think the other considerations are around the monitoring, which again, it's almost like you're deploying a separate product alongside your own. And for some folks, that's when they turn to, products like ours in our managed services area, where, that's a headache you don't want to deal with. Here's an entire team that you can bring in to supplement your existing, staff or analysts, whatever it is. And that's where we kind of supplement. Again, we're not trying to replace, and it's not a conversation about replacing those people, but bringing in the right folks that have the right context and knowledge. So the monitoring and the tooling around how you even deploy that separate set of technology becomes much easier, I would say, in the cloud when you're talking about distributed, centrally managed deployments. When we're deploying something on-prem, you almost have to bring in another third-party tool that's going to do that monitoring and logging and auditing and all that for you. But in the cloud, there's so many built-in tools around that today that just having the right folks with the right knowledge around how to take advantage of that really becomes beneficial and almost critical for scalability or some of these other concerns, starting at the bottom all the way to the top. So just a couple of my initial thoughts there for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. So let's we did get one comment on the chat while you were talking, Rick, and what the person said is, we can only bite off one thing at a time. Our Epic is hosted by Epic. We're looking to move our imaging systems to the cloud as the next step, as a next step. We don't have the resources to do an 18-month move. It will take more like 3 years. You guys have any thoughts around that comment? It's a matter-of-fact comment, but if you got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's the reality of the world that we live in. We have fixed budget and resources, and we've always got more demand than we can satisfy in any technology organization. I think the question that comes to my mind is, how can Rhapsody help? And we have a managed services offering that we can spin up to help assist in cases like that, where the demand is sort of spiky for resources, right? So we do have that capability, and I don't know how many of our customers are aware of that, but that might be something that's worth going into if there are further questions about it.
Yeah, and I think that first point too, just how we can help. It's not the same for everyone, and it really gets to this next point on the slide, is evaluating and aligning to your goals. You kind of want to further elaborate, Zach, on this?
No, I think the key there is that the way that we present a future state of a cloud-based integration capability has to align with business strategy that our customers have. And I get the sense that the vast majority of organizations represented on this call have some sort of business strategy that involves greater migration to the cloud. And it's just a question of where each individual solution or each individual capability falls in the priority list, given resource and time and budget constraints. So yeah, we want to make sure that our planning is aligned with the strategies in these cases, and that our governance and security frameworks are acceptable based on the requirements that our customers have for their organizations.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Zach. Yeah, I just had I think there was an echo problem there, but all right, yeah, well, thank you for adding that in. And really, I think that, there's everyone, again, has different needs. We had someone recently we interviewed that had already moved to CorePoint as a service, and really, when they talked about it, it was almost as if they said, there was a divestiture, they were sharing with someone else, and basically they said, look, I don't have the army of people to maintain this myself. And sometimes it's just that clear cut, and in other times it's more, as we talked about, an iterative process and planning on where do I want to bring, Rhapsody as a service or CorePoint as a service into the scenario, and here's my plan to move maybe my new relationships, my new things that I bring in that I need to integrate with. I have 2 environments going for a while. whatever it might be. But that's something that we need to, you probably discuss with your account manager, your solution consultants, and come up with a solution that best fits your needs. All right, well, yeah, thank you for that. And I don't think we have any other comments, so I'm gonna move to the next slide. Really is just summarizing what we've talked about today and pivoting to a future focused path. You know, we talked about determining where the gaps exist in your building blocks. We talked about filling those gaps with the right people and your strong partnerships. No matter where you're at, maybe it is a 3-year plan. Let us partner with you in helping develop that plan and then aligning to your strategic goals to ensure that you get where you want to go. Any other thoughts from the panel? Anything that comes to mind that maybe hasn't been mentioned that you've been meaning to throw into the conversation today?
No, I just want to echo what Dan said about how every organization's journey is unique. And we understand this, and we have a range of capabilities that we can bring to bear to meet you where you are on that journey and help you realize those strategic imperatives that you're trying to reach for.
Yeah, and I think from a data integration perspective, the suite of tooling that we offer, or at least have knowledge of, doesn't mean that everything has to be an initial rocket to that entire cloud deployment. Like Zach said, we can meet you where you are. There's so many good technologies available, even to start deploying cloud hosted engines or just specific portions of your solution while still maintaining your existing code base on an on-prem solution, just as a stepping stone, a first start where you can start moving in that direction, one thing at a time. And then, yeah, we're here to either help or supplement, in a way where if you have no knowledge or experience with the cloud and it's not something you want to dip your toe into, but you still want to take advantage of it, we have offerings that are cloud native that will work alongside your existing deployment. If it's something where you have an existing team that's focused on it and you're already in a hybrid model, well, great. Can we again supplement that, or can we impart some knowledge on some strategy for how to design your architecture in a way that's in our realm HIPAA compliant and within the bounds of all these other security requirements, or just optimization when it comes to sizing and positioning of all those different components. Which cloud tools or suites you want to go with. There's so many large ones out there that even these days offer their own healthcare focused solutions. We ourselves utilize a lot of different vendors, and so could it provide some knowledge or experience and case studies that provide some insight for you all to make those decisions without having to go all in on hey, Rhapsody's going to solve these problems for us.
Thank you, guys. And thanks again for participating today and bringing your knowledge to the table for the participant audience. And I'm gonna, unless we have any other comments pop up in the next 30 seconds, let's talk about some closeout notes as we end the webinar today. If you have additional questions, please put them in email or reach out to your account manager. We'd love to have a conversation with you and start you down that road and help you get where you want to go. As we said, the recording from this webinar will be available within 24 hours. You'll receive that in your inbox. And just thanks again so much for joining today, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.